Hello, everyone. Welcome back to St. Louis Teens, and welcome back to our series on voices of peace and justice from Ferguson to Minneapolis. We are here today with Louis Reed, who is the president of the St. Louis City Board of Aldermen. President Reed, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm so happy to have an opportunity to talk to you today. And as I told you earlier, just very impressed about the level of thoughtfulness and what you're doing with your program, and honored to have an opportunity to be here to talk to you today.
Well, thank you so much for being here as well. The Board of Aldermen is the legislative body for the city of St. Louis that creates, passes, and amends local laws, as well as approves the city's budget every year. With the recent racial unrest across the country and in St. Louis, President Reed launched Restore St. Louis, asking all St. Louisians to come together to help small businesses that were affected during the riots through cleaning efforts and through fundraising. President Reed, we thank you so much for your phenomenal work.
Sri, I want to thank you also for working to raise money, and everybody that you reached out to that gave checks, that are watching the program, that donated any amount of money. I just want to thank you so much for that. A lot of those businesses were already struggling because of COVID-19, and they were able to finally reopen, right? And then have them shut down again, and some of them totally destroyed, is taking a toll, not just on the businesses. And it's important for people to remember that a lot of these businesses sat directly in largely minority communities, right? So the people that were hurt by that were the people that worked there from throughout the community, right? That were able to walk to work and gain a paycheck to be able to, feed their kids and keep the lights on in their home and pay for rent and things of that nature. So those funds will help restore those families by getting that business back up on its feet, so that they can come and be employed again sooner than later. And also, some of those shopping centers, right? The people that shop there, that needed that shopping center close by because of transportation issues, no longer have access to it now. So I'm so thankful to you and all of your viewers for what they've done to help.
Well, thank you so much for taking the initiatives to start that. I did want to sort of turn back the clock a little bit and ask you about, what inspired you to go into public service, and how has your journey been like so far?
Well, hopefully, young people like yourself decide to go into public service at some point in time. I knew from a very early age I wanted to do something in public service, but I hadn't considered elected office or anything like that, because of a lot of things in my family and a lot of circumstances that we lived under. Right? I've lived winters in my household. Sometimes we didn't have heat. Right? Sometimes we didn't have running water, because if you don't have the heat, the pipes would freeze, and so on and so forth. Right? And still would have to, manage to get up, get to school, and everything like. So I understand those struggles and challenges. And they say, America is of the people, by the people, and for the people, right? It's certainly of the people, and it's certainly by the people. But for it to be for the people, it requires voices, and it requires people to stand up and fight for those things that they believe in. And then when my brother was shot and killed, it was then that I had kind of an awakening, and because he was my best friend, right? And when he was tragically taken away, and I saw how the system just didn't respond in the way I would have wanted it to respond, I became more convinced that I wanted to get into elected office. And some years later, I ended up running and getting into elected office. And I'll tell you this, sometimes those things that you look at from the outside, they seem so simple and so easy to fix. But once you get into it, to untangle it and to actually succeed in transforming it, it can take on a whole new life. For example, body cameras. I started fighting for body cameras in 2014.
Wow.
And it from 2014 till yesterday to break through the entrenched systems to get it done.
Wow. I think as someone, as an onlooker, I think, I definitely would not have imagined, the process to take that long. Or, I think that even as like an onlooker, we often forget, just as regular citizens, how long the legislative process can be. And I think it's always important to sort of, realize that the legislators are doing their best as well, in many of the times. And, it's not always just like an easy fix. Uh, I did want to ask, at your current job, I know it can be difficult, but if you had to sort of pick one, what would be your favorite part of your job?
The people, meeting the people and talking to people, even though sometimes it's so terribly heartbreaking, right? And but it's the people, right? That's the whole thing, right? Like for example, today I had a conversation with two mothers. Both of the mothers had lost a child due to violence, right? And those conversations are very, very difficult, and they never get easy. But then they also remind you why you are in this job and why you are doing the work, right? It's not about you, it's about the people, right? So it's the people. And that's hearing, and also hearing those stories of joy and success, and being able to help people get through these tough life situations, whatever they may be. And I can tell you this also, I've been in a lot of elections, right? Won a ton of elections, but I've lost the election too when I ran for mayor. And on the other side, when you lose an election, the thing for me that hurts the most is you think back about all of the voters and the people you talk to along that campaign trail, and you just feel such a sense that you have let them down, all right? So it's the people for me. That has to be the thing, no matter which side you look at for me.
And currently, with the recent death of George Floyd and the anti-racism movement sweeping our nation, how do you think peace and justice can best be restored during these difficult times?
So, here's a piece of advice I'm gonna give you. If you ever run for office, and I pray that you do, and you are successful at winning, and I pray that you do, and you're in a leadership role, at times like this, when you have, the murder of George Floyd that has now not just gripped this nation, but it gripped people all around the globe, right? It's at those times that you need to work the hardest for transformation. And the reason why is because, no matter what a person's public persona is, and I'm talking about elected officials now, right? No matter what their public persona is, that doesn't mean that when they take the floor to make a vote, that they have not cut a deal or something to say, I'm not going to find a way not to support what is right, right? But it's at times like this where there's a higher level of accountability. So you can move those things that you normally could not move. Here's an example. When Mike Brown was shot and killed, right, in 2014, the Board of Aldermen had been attempting to put a civilian oversight commission in place for the police department. So the civilian oversight commission over the police department in place since like the 80s, right? Before I've gotten there, before you were born, right? They had been working on that and were never able to put the votes together. But because of all the community upheaval, when we put the issue back in front of the Board of Aldermen, it flew through with overwhelming support, even though a year prior, they kicked it out. But because of the community upheaval, right? The calls for America to be not just of the people and by the people, but also for the people, that they had to vote on it. And we were able to move that issue forward and several other issues like that. So when you have those moments, those teachable moments where there is a thrust and a passion displayed in its rawest fashion, that's when you need to buckle down and do your best work and push through those things that you know will begin to transform this nation.
And talking about those policies that, you're able to sort of, go through and really have a strong push for, what are those current policies that the Board of Aldermen is focusing on right now to achieve this current goal?
Well, we're working on a number of things. At 1 o'clock today, I'm introducing a use of force bill. And the use of force bill has de-escalation procedures in it. It has a ban on chokeholds and strangleholds. It has a requirement to intervene policy so that the police officers that witness something happening between, another police officer and anyone else, they now will have a duty to intervene and stop that officer, right? And it has a reporting requirement for any time they unholster their weapon. And if indeed we end up with a national registry database, they will be required to, the St. Louis City Police Department will be required to report to that. And it also has no-knock warrants and end of no-knock warrants also. So, and again, even that bill, a year ago, 2 years ago, it would have been absolutely impossible to get the votes before the Board of Aldermen to adopt that bill. But because of what's happening across the country now, it appears that we will be able to get the votes and get the bill done. So today is just the presentation of the bill. On Monday, this coming Monday, we're going to have a public hearing, so we take public testimony and allow people to come on the call and testify as to why they think it's a good bill or why they think it's a bad bill.
And talking about the current movement, I know that, in 2014, Ferguson had a similar movement, talking about the racial injustices. And I know that you were a big part of that movement in 2014. And from your experience, did our country make any progress in these past 6 years, may it be in terms of policy or executing any other part of the solution?
Oh, yes. I think that, because all of us want to make more progress, right? We're never satisfied with the progress that we have achieved. But I have to say that things were absolutely achieved through that when Mike Brown shot. I mean, think about it now. It was in Ferguson, right? And I was there because in Ferguson, name of the church, we were at a church in Ferguson. And I was one of the main speakers. So the guy I brought up to speak from the audience, right, was a guy that on the way in talked to me and said, we need body cameras and police departments across the country need body cameras, right? It was very early on, right when the protests were just beginning. So I brought him up and he made just this impassionate plea for body cameras. And, the news carried that and stuff. So that message began to spread across this country. So now you look across the country and most of the major police departments now have body cameras, right? And some of the more recent things that we're seeing, you have the independent people who are taking it with their cell phones, right? But you can now get information and get more detailed information from what's happening with all the various different body cameras that are available on the scene also. So we've seen that, right? Just in the city of St. Louis, like I said, we were able to put in place a civilian oversight commission. We were also able to put in place a minority inclusion bill, workforce development, various different things like that we weren't able to do before. And then also you cannot take away the fact that because of some of those earlier protests and what happened under Mike Brown and all of the ones various, all the way along the way, Von Derek Myers, who lived right up the street from where I'm talking to you right now, right? because of all of that, it's been a slow building, and it's been an awakening that people now have taken notice, and they said, this is real. This is not made up. This is not something that people are just saying, you know, or something that just is happening every once in a while, right? Because it's been right there in front of America over and over again. So now you see under George Floyd where it's universal now, where people are saying, well, enough's enough, right? You see in, soccer players from abroad taking a knee before a game now, right? So all of those things that were very, very, that would be, that the community at large or America at large would marginalize before. They're no longer marginalizing them anymore. So, so I think all of those things build on each other, right? And it's taken people time to awaken, but they are beginning to wake.
And I think that's, a lot of things that you mentioned, are things that, worked. And, if you had to, sort of pick some from the Ferguson movement in 2014 to the current movement now, what would you say has not worked so well?
Well, I think that one of the challenges is, messaging, right? Because there's always, we haven't developed a unified messaging across all sectors, right? Except for, I'm feeling, it seems that now under George Floyd, things are beginning to gel and there's more of a unified messaging. But if you were around back when Mike Brown was shot and killed, it's down there day one for, on protests and working within the protest ranks to try to, keep people organized on one accord and messaging and stuff like that. And it was just, we weren't as organized as we see what's happening now, right? The other thing is, all of the available means of communications have just been expanded, 1,000-fold, right? I remember, only maybe not too far before Ferguson, maybe a few years before Ferguson, that Twitter had just started catching on and getting hot. Now it's now you have so many messaging systems, right, and so many means to communicate that I think that all of those things have also helped us to just people across the country to have more of a unified message.
During these difficult times of pandemic and racial unrest, we have seen our community come together in several ways. And there are many more that are continuing to ask, what can we do? Can you tell us, President Reed, your top 3 powerful, actionable items that one can be doing during this time to end racism and help restore justice?
Use your voice is your power. Use your voice is your power. Use your voice is your power. Top 3. And it is, I think oftentimes the public underestimates the power they have to move something, right? And the power their one voice has. Now, I'm the longest serving president of the Board of Aldermen in the history of the city at this point. And I can think about all of those things that we've passed and we were able to successfully get done, affordable housing trust fund to help people pay for their rent, utilities, and various different things like that, minority inclusion plans, so many bills that we were able to get done. And on every single one of the difficult ones, the legislators themselves weren't able to move those things until the public weighed in, right? So just by one phone call or one email message, right? You can move the needle. You never know when you see things moving through a legislative branch or even an executive branch, that your one phone call, your one text message to a friend to ask them to call or leave an email may just be that one to move the needle. I mean, the all other things being equal, the public is the tiebreaker, and there are a lot of ties, right? We're looking at some bills today, and the people, quite frankly, a couple of those legislators will be moved based on the public weighing in. So use your voice. Find a way to get engaged and get involved, right? And again, America is what? Supposed to be what? Of the people, by the people, and
For the people.
for the people. Certainly going to be of the people, certainly going to be by the people, but for it to be of the people, it takes your voice, it takes your involvement.
And I think that it's very interesting and helpful that you mention, using your voice, because I know that there's a lot of teens, not just in St. Louis, but around the nation who are, very passionate about this current movement and want to help out. And, they might not be old enough to vote yet, but I think using their voice is definitely something they can do. And what would your message to teens be during this time? And how can they also be a part of the current solution?
Look, uh, reach out to your friends, create groups of friends online, right? And as a group, address your legislators. If you hear, like, for example, the bills that we have coming up this week, every single city has a legislative branch of government, right? So whether you're in New York, California, it doesn't matter what state, city you're in, they have a legislative branch. Get online and take a look at the upcoming bills and the committee hearings and find a way to weigh in at that committee hearing, right? You know how if we're debating something at the full board and we see a group of teens walk in and sign up to testify on the bill, that in and of itself is a game changer, right? It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teens, right? It's a game changer. So you all have so very much power. It's just absolutely mind-blowing when you see it play out in real time. And, fortunately, I get to see it play out in real time quite often. So I'm telling you, find a way to connect to your local branch of government, no matter what city you're in. Doesn't matter how small or how large, they have a legislative branch, right? And right now, with things being online, Zoom call in, however they set it up, conference call in or whatever. But when they come back where you can do it in person, also, get down to that meeting and weigh in. You'll be shocked at how much of a difference you will make.
President Reed, we thank you so much for taking the initiative to bring our community together during these times of need and for serving our community both through policymaking and by being a critical part of this movement. We thank you so much for your service and for your time and for answering all of our questions today.
Thank you so much, and please stay in touch. I want to keep in touch with you because I see you're doing some great things. You're already doing great things, but God is willing, and I hope He is. You will go on to do some phenomenal things in public service. You're way ahead of the curve right now. Stay there.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good luck.